So many years ago I was into my knife making thing, but I didn't have the tools or anything, and I made this fantasy dagger. I made it out of bay wood, tree that we cut down, used the wood to make this, made it up in a couple of parts. Always loved the twin blade thing, and then I gave it a sort of sodalite stone texture finish and look. So I've always wanted to make this out of steel, so I thought, yeah, now I know how. Let's see if we can do it. So what I did is I made a pine blank, so to speak, of exactly the proportions and diameters and everything of how it's going to look. And what I did is I changed the base into a sort of different look, skull crusher kind of thing, and just gave different sort of lines and everything to it. The nice thing about making a blank is that I know the weight and the balance and everything of how it's going to be when it's made out of steel. So it's bigger than the original, a little bit longer and a bit finer and that sort of stuff. So here's the steel pieces. This has been forged quite a bit already. I've drawn these out, forged them up, but they're in bits, they're in parts, and that's because I can't forge it and make it all as one piece with the tools that I have at present. So these two pieces have to now be welded together and then finished up so that they're ready for the final quench. Then this piece here I'm actually going to quench as well, so that it's actually going to be a fully working model. This piece is then going to go in there as a bit of the grip piece like that. Here's the handle steel, and then here's the base. It's still in parts, and that's the sort of skull crusher thing that's going to come together. That's going to weld on like that, and then that's going to weld together. That's going to be similar to that. So these pieces here have to be shaped, they have to be welded together. This has to be shaped, this has to be shaped still. All of this has to be shaped. So that's what I'm going to be doing now, is refining this, getting this down ready, and then this is going to be quenched separate to this, unless I do it all as one piece and actually just quench it all as one. Let's see how it goes. Right, so joined these pieces together yesterday. I used something called tool steel welding rods, which is as hard as this steel. It's tool steel, so it's going to last any sort of give and take or push and shove that I give to these. The join is very lacquer. I'm very happy with it. It's joined very nicely. Now you can get more of an idea of kind of what it's going to look like and everything like that. So now I'm going to, you can see on this piece here, it blends very nicely. It's got a very good curve through it. The problem that I have with my sanding tools is I can't get in there with my sanding tools once this is attached to that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark out where these two join, and then I'm going to add a bit of a curve up onto this. It's not going to be as pronounced as this, or maybe it will. Let's see what it looks like. So that's going to be curved up, and then this piece here, which goes on like that, which is going to be like this piece, I have to then curve all of those ends around and then shape it a bit up on the sides. So like that's gone up into this. I'm going to have to then also work out where this attaches onto that, and also do that grad in before I attach this. Then once this is ready, I'm going to then shape it like this. I'm going to do the curves, get it all ready, and then once that's ready, then I'm going to prep this piece. The trick are these pieces here. They're going to have to shape like this, and I'm unsure how I'm going to do it. I don't think I should attach them like this first and then shape them. I think I need to shape them before, so I'm just going to work out exactly how that goes and what's that about. There we are, getting closer. So I thought I'd record the process of this knife and how it's going and all that sort of stuff. So as you can see, everything's joined up as we did before. I'm still trying to smooth this out to make sure that it's completely flat and consistent all the way up. I've got little divots in here that I need to get out, and some at the base here. On this side as well, I've got some divots and well. These are all forge blemishes, which I'm going to try and get out, but I want to try and do it without taking off too much meat. So I'm going to be doing that on the sander with quite a rough belt to try and get through it quite quickly. Then this piece is getting along quite well. I need to also get this to be consistent, get all the forge blemishes and marks out of it. What's quite cool is I've narrowed this into a bit of a blade-ish type thing, which is quite nice. So this is also going to be worked on this. And I've got this part's going to come over here, and then the handle's going to attach onto it like that. So this has been smoothed off very nicely, and that'll be welded onto this quite soon, and then finished up once that's welded on. The handle will then attach onto that, and then I've got to then just smooth that section onto that. This piece comes then onto the base here. You're not going to see this side because this side will be on the handle, so I'm not smoothing that too much. But this has still got quite a bit of blemishing, on it. So I've got to smooth that up. I've already smoothed the other side, so I'm going to smooth that up and then round it off quite a bit more. It's a lot bigger currently than is needed, so I'll work on that. Then I joined these two pieces together. These are going to be coming in underneath like that, and then what it is these are this. I've got to smooth this down and then bring that in on the sides there. I've already cleaned up these quite a bit, which isn't too bad. These then go on like that. I'm going to shape these first before they go on, to be curved. That's going to be all correct. Cool. So that's what's going to be happening here. Got the angle grinder for some of the smoothing, and yeah, that's how it's going to go. Enjoy. Safety first. What I realized is I was grinding away this amount of steel, which I don't need to because I'm not going to use this steel in the end. So I'm going to cut that steel off, which is my final profile. And then I only need to sand that amount. I don't need to sand all of that as well. Right, now that I've cut this into the shape that it needs to be to match that, I need to now this piece comes on here, and that's going to be like that. So I'm going to take the piece that I cut off and then cut that to shape. Right, so the steel is still quite soft. It's what they call annealed. And so I'm going to be drilling in the holes for the pins, so that if I do a quench and the steel gets hard, I won't be able to drill in then. So I'm going to do it now while it's still soft. Using a drill press with a hardened drill bit so that it goes through the steel easily. Right, so the holes are now drilled in. You'll see I put some water into the hollow, and that's just to keep the drill bits cool. If it gets too hot, it'll lose its hardness. You saw it fly free there, and that was my mistake. I wasn't holding it tightly, so that was my bad. Great, holes are drilled and ready. Right, so this part of the handle I'm going to be working on now. That's obviously my wood blank. So this part is going to attach onto here, and then these parts attach onto here. The difficulty I have here is that this is too proud. I'm going to have to shape this a little bit more to fit onto here properly. There's the two parts that I'm going to be putting onto here, so that's going to get shaped. Right, so I'm going to be attaching these two parts together. I'm going to do a bevel here and a bevel there so that the weld fills in and makes it flush. Then I have to work on this curve here, make sure that it fits perfectly before I do the weld, because once I've done the weld, I won't be able to get the bolts inside there. So I need to actually get this perfect now. Right, so I'm going to be welding this part of the crossguard onto the blade. What I'm using is a tool steel welding rod. So it's for dissimilar steels as well, but it's tool steel. So it's going to be as hard as the steel that I'm welding it onto for a very strong weld. So it's a blue welding rod. Can't mistake it. Right, beautiful welds, like dimes. So very happy the weld's gone well. It's sealed nicely. It's still in the right shape and the right aspect, which is cool. So now I'm going to grind these welds flat, and just remember this is as hot as the sun. Handle with care. Right, so it's starting to disappear, the weld bubbles over there. It's almost perfect. This is very good. I'm starting to shape the edge a bit as well, and what I'm going to change now is to a smoother belt, so that I can actually do a smoother grind on here and get it readier for the quench. It still hasn't been quenched yet. Right, so that's where I'm going to leave this for today. It's pretty good. The seam's pretty good. That join's very good. Can hardly see it there. It's still going to get final sanding once it's been quenched. So that's going to be where I'm going to take the full polishing. So the next part, I'm going to take this handle, and I'm going to weld that piece on and start to sand and grind this down, ready for attaching onto here. And I'm going to take this end piece, skull crusher, and I'm going to weld these bits on. So that's next. So now it's welded together, but now I've got to clean up all the weld joints and all that sort of stuff. It'll be interesting to see how it cleans up, and then I've got to weld on the other base to that as well. Right, so that's on. Wasn't as successful as I wanted. Not sure what went wrong, but anyway, it's on. You can shape it from there. Till tomorrow. Just an example of the how good the steel is that I'm using in this blade is the resonance that it makes. So if it doesn't work out as a blade, I'm going to do it as a wind chime. Right, so I welded this up last time, so now it's got a whole lot of welding blemishes and that sort of thing inside it. You can see it's the 4-piece like that. So today I'm going to be grinding in here, making this smoother and hopefully polishing it up quite a bit, and then after that I'm going to be welding the cap onto it, so it's going to have that sort of a look. Cool. So this is going to be ground today. Right, there's some bad welds in here, so I want to fix up and seal these. Some didn't actually even make contact correctly there at all. So this has now been cleaned up, and I'm going to just weld into these spots that didn't have a decent weld. Right, so you can see it's looking nice and shiny. There's it's very well filled in here. Little bits of touches. I don't think I'm going to chase it anymore. Now it's just going to be some fine grinding to make it smoother. Right, so you can see that the grinds are very good now. It's more even. Almost all the holes are filled. So I'm happy with it at this stage. Woo! So I'll just take some sanding. And it'll be taken down a few hundred degrees. So this is good. Next part is just putting the cap on. Right, so this went very well. Very happy with these joints. It actually is very, very lacquer. Now I'm going to be sandpaper grinding the edges, because it's got a little bit of a, I don't know if that can even focus. It's a little bit wobbly. Anyway, so I'm going to do a bit of a grind on that. Then I'm going to grind like this to prep to weld onto that. Okay, so this is looking all good and shiny and ready to go. I've flattened this enough for welding onto here, so I'm going to do that next. Right, now it's going to be welding the handle onto this piece, make it one. Right, so the two pieces are welded together. It's it's all right. Just going to grind away some of this, and then I'll grind these a bit better. Right, this is the most important part of the whole thing. Everything comes down to this. This is the big weld. This is the one. I'm going to do a couple of tack welds and then I'll finish it. Yesy! Meh. Well, the blade's quenched. I quenched this in water just because it wouldn't fit in the the drum. Looks straight. Right, the blade's gone through the quenching process, so it's got all the scale and everything on it. This was quenched separately to the blade. I did a double quench on the blade because these were skew, so I had to actually heat it up and re-straighten it so the clay didn't happen. So now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this and I'm going to be clearing all the black and everything off it and then taking it to a final polish. Yeah, so that's for today. I'm using quite a fine grit sandpaper, so this is very fine because I'm not shaping, I'm just cleaning. And then after that we're going to go into a very fine polishing sandpaper belt. I see that there's actually a lot of imperfections still in the steel. I have to grind down this part of the blade. It's a little bit proud compared to the rest of the blade. So there's actually still some shape grinding that needs to happen. So I'm going to be changing to a rougher belt. Right, so this is a bit of a finer belt. I'm now going to be polishing more just for looks. You can see that there's still some spots over here that need to be done, and then on the other side there's still some spots over there that need to be done, ground down as far as I can, but I just want to polish it up now for myself. Right, I'm finished for today. What I did is I just gave it a bit of a polish at the end, just so that I can feel happy that it's closer, and also just to see the final little defects that are still left. It's coming along very well. Edges sharp as hell at the moment. Little details like shining up this skull crusher at the end. That's going to happen later. But yeah, it's looking good. Right, so what I've got here, this is some wild olive. I've already cut it a little bit, getting it ready. Going to make it into handles, scales for the blade. So I really like the grain on this. I'm going to now size it up for handles. So really liking the grain. The grain is really pretty grain. So now to check the fit. Right, so what I have are these 4 pieces that I can now choose from, and I'll choose similar patterns and grains, but I'll see which one has got the least defects. They're all the same width, all the same length, so those are my choices. Right, so I'm going to be doing a white liner, and that's going to be going against the handle here. So it'll be 2 pieces of white on either side. So that's going to create a bit of height, and then I'm going to be doing one of these pieces. Now it's to try and look at this grain structure here to see what's going to be coming through to the surface, to know which is going to be my top and which is my bottom. I really like this grain, but it only goes that deep, so it's pretty much going to have to be the remaining. So it's to see which grain is going to be the best. It's going to be A. BB. Right, this is going to be the difficult process now of gently and slowly working in these handles, making sure that they fit exactly. Great, they fit as well as I think they should at this stage. Right, now to cut these out. Alright, so what I've done is I've clamped the two pieces together with the handle. I'm now going to drill, then I'm going to put spacers, and then I'm going to swap this around to the other side to make sure that it stays in the right place. So what I'm going to be doing now is I've got these two nails holding it all in place, and I'm going to drill through all the parts to make sure that it lines up perfectly, so that when I put the pins through, I'm not going to be battling with slight alignments being out. Right, so I've drilled through all of these. I know that it goes all the way through here and it's very smooth. So now I can prepare the pins and prepare to do the gluing and the pinning. Right, so this is going to be the putting the handles on the sword. So this is labeled side A, this is A, the liner is A, so that I don't mix up the parts. I've already pre-drilled through here so it all fits exactly. Everything lines up and all that sort of a thing. I'm going to start by cleaning all the surfaces with acetone first, just to make sure that they are free of any kind of thing that would inhibit bonding. So all the contact surfaces that are going to have glue on them, those are going to just be cleaned up with the acetone. Then I'm going to clean the parts that are going to be glued together. So what you'll notice is that I have my clamps ready, everything's on standby, all the parts are ready, my mixing is ready, all my pins that I'm going to be using are ready. I've got my hammer. If anything goes wrong, I've got my pliers to pull everything out if I need to. Because once you start, this is a process that you've got you've got about 3 minutes to get the whole thing done properly. So you've really got to have everything set up and good to go. Right, so all of these are now secure on here. Just do a double check, make sure that all the nails are through as deep as they should be, where they are. And that's it. Now you leave it to dry. You can now use the acetone to get rid of the epoxy glue off your fingers. Works very well. And if you've got it on the blade at all, which I have done here, you can just clean that off before it dries. Right, so the glue's all set, everything's done. Now I'm going to undo these vice grips and then start sanding on here. This is the new sanding belt. Right. So you'll see that these pins are a little bit too proud. I'm not going to grind those off because then it heats up and it starts to melt the epoxy. So I'm going to actually hand file these off, and you'll see that it's actually quite flush on this side. There's pins on this side. So I'm just going to cut those off. Alright, so I'm starting on a very rough belt, and I'm just going to start with the basic shaping. and then we'll see how we evolve from there. Right, so it's coming along very well. The bits in here still need to be ground out. Same with the bits in here, but I'm getting very close to the right dimensions for the handle, which is great, and the grain's coming through very nicely. I'm now going to swap to a smaller sized wheel. So a bit of a bugger. I'm not able to get in there with the grinder. I'm going to have to use a grinding disc on an angle grinder. So I'm going to do that now. Changing to a finer belt now. Right, this is a fine belt. Now for finishing. Right, this is shaped very close to how I'd like it. I think I'm going to do the last bit as a hand sand on the handle. I don't want to take off more meat than I have. Quite happy with the results so far. Doing more refinements along the edges. But overall, yeah, it's coming together here. Right, so I've already sanded, hand sanded this blade quite a lot. I started with a 120, then 150, 340, 400, 600, 800, 1000, and each time I did those, I used paraffin on the sandpaper. So these are all waterproof sandpapers, so I used paraffin as a cutting agent up to and including 1000. Then from then on I did 1200 and then 1500. So this is now the 1500 that I'm going to be using, not the 320. So 1500, and that's going to be the finest that I'm going to go. And each time I do these, I do it with soap, so not soapy water but actual soap itself, and this is something that the guys are finding is quite useful with the waterproof papers, is to actually do the final very fine sanding with soap. Now I have sharpened the blade already, so I'm wearing gloves because it has been sharpened already, so I don't want to cut myself. So what I'm going to be doing is doing another layer. I apply with a dropper, I just apply my soap, which is Windoline in this case. I'm using Windoline as my soap, and apply that to my my paper, and then I just, yeah. And before it dries, I just wipe it off with a cloth. And I take the bit that is still untouched and I put that on the front. Give that a little bit of Windoline, and I use that then on the blade side. Again, I apply Windoline between each application. Now I'm doing my metal polish. I'm going to be polishing it up. This isn't necessarily the polish that I recommend, but this is just what I have on hand, so this is what I'm going to be using. I'm having a bit of an issue in here. It's a bit dull, and I'm not too sure why. So I'm going to actually go in there with the 3000 sandpaper and just do that by hand, just to make sure I'm getting full contact on it. So I'm actually going to just put the stuff on the metal itself and just see what we get. So it's a 3000. Let's see what we get. That's it. Finished. Done.